Well, la próxima, y lo voy a decir en español, the next one is our guest, Tania Pariona. Activista indígena, ex congresista de la República de Perú, ex becaria del Alto Comisionado para los Derechos Humanos, miembro del Enlace Continental de Mujeres Indígenas de las Américas, ETMIA, ECMIA, asociada al Centro de Culturas Indígenas del Perú, Chirapac, actualmente responsable del programa de Mujeres Indígenas. Felizmente de invitar a nuestra hermana Tania para que nos comparta su experiencia, luchas, desafíos y sueños.
All right, Tania, this is going to be interesting. So, because my Spanish is as good as my Chinese, so it is not.
Hola, Tania, esto va a ser muy interesante porque mi español es un poco bueno. Así que a ver qué tal.
So let me go right into it.
Así que voy a entrar en detalle.
If you can answer this question, give you the 2 minutes. What are you seeing out there in Peru? How are you thinking right now about indigenous rights in the post, like after COVID-19 world?
Sí, bueno, en primer lugar quiero agradecerle.
Hi. Well, first of all, I would like to thank the invitation and thank you, Gasali. I'm very honored to be here in this webinar together with wise people such as Kenneth and sisters such as Hokabet and other leaders who have also a lot of experience in the United Nations who have worked really hard in their communities and in their regions, in their countries. This all gives us strength to keep on going and to keep on working here, especially in Peru. While our situation is alarming because due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the poverty has increased and also the discrimination against indigenous peoples have increased as well. And this has added also to the problems that we already had, such as environmental issues, pollution issues, the fact that they are taking our lands from us. So we are suffering a lot due to the pandemic, of course. We have thousands of infected people, sadly, and a lot of people have died as well. We've been raising our voices so that the government can take measures to implement strategies. However, sadly and unfortunately, these measures have not been taken into account. We're still very careful, and the indigenous peoples are still working very hard. We're making proposals, we're speaking up, and in our society, in Peru, sometimes many people think that indigenous people represent a minority, but this is wrong. We are in fact a majority. In 2017, 8 million Peruvian people were part of an indigenous people, so we're not at all a minority. But of course, this context and the pandemic is also making that we become more resilient, and we are using our knowledge in a practical way so that we can prevent people from falling ill, so that we can address this pandemic appropriately. Some indigenous people have actually created committees to take care of the infected people, and every community is making a lot of efforts. But this has always been that way. In fact, we've experienced a lot of endemic diseases, a lot of pandemics and many people have died, for example, in the Amazons due to malaria, the dengue, of course. And we've also survived social pandemics such as discrimination and racism. Many people have been discriminated due to how they look, how they speak, which identity they have. And it's something that we fight against every day. These are negative aspects that we have to deal with on a daily basis. So this is a good opportunity to be aware of these problems. We have to change our mind. We have to value what we have, our communities, the biodiversity, the environment, the role of agriculture, of our food, we have to be very proud of all of these aspects, of course.
Thank you so much, Tania. And then it's such a strong, how should I say it? Like capturing like what you're seeing. Anything you talked about, like the impacts of COVID-19. Any opportunities maybe that you see, maybe in Peru or in Abya Latin America, that you can see that can be that can improve Indigenous people's rights and maybe governance and or diplomacy?
Well, I think it's a great opportunity for visibility. It's very sad that we have to make us visible because we are being neglected by the government. We lack food, for example, but we have to turn the tables and to state that we are here, that we've been suffering from this inequality. The healthcare doesn't work anymore, also because of the lack of investment, because the government does not want to take care of the indigenous people. We need a healthcare that is good enough to also be able to take care of indigenous people. Another aspect is education. For example, some communities in remote places do not have an access to online education. So many people, many children are missing school. And of course, before the pandemic, the educational system was not at its best. So now we're facing even more problems due to this pandemic. And we need that the government invests more money in the educational system, for example. And this is very much needed to be able to transform our reality, to have better living conditions. And this is also a great opportunity so that the decision-making actors can also tackle these issues, and that the indigenous people are more active when it comes to political participation. They have to participate, and in that sense, we're facing a lot of difficulties as well, a lot of burdens, because we don't have a legal mechanisms to guarantee the participation of indigenous people in the parliament, for example. So we've made, of course, proposals, and in the hope that they are accepted. But of course, social pressure is also very important to be able to come forward. And we face a challenge, which is that we have to start thinking about our role in politics. I've learned a lot about indigenous diplomacy in the UN, and we have to put them into practice at a regional level as well. We have to be able to talk to decision-making people. We have to be able to be part of the opposition. We have to be able to discuss and take part in debates. Just one or two people manage to reach the parliament, but this is not enough, of course, because we do not represent a majority in the parliament, so we cannot pass laws. So this is a very important matter for us. We are working on a political reform so that we can have from 10 to 32 seats in the parliament. And this is very relevant. And why? Because the parliament is where the laws are enacted, laws that can enable us to go further and to acknowledge us as well. We have to have a voice to define our future and our lives. So this is a great opportunity for us to speak up for our rights, for our expectations. And before that, we didn't have the media attention. Now we have the pandemics, so sadly they are paying attention to us due to the increase of deaths and infected people. So this can be a great opportunity for us to become more visible, of course.
And thank you so much, Tania, for also highlighting all that. I have Hoka. She has a burning question for you. So Hoka, go ahead.
Hi, Tania. Nice to meet you. It's a great honor to listen to you, and we acknowledge the work that you are doing in Peru, women like you, also at an international regional level. So my question is related to the proposals. So which kind of proposals should be presented so that we can have plurinational policies that respect and acknowledge the indigenous people, and how can we interact between one another? For example, in Peru, we are indeed a majority, not a minority. So how can we do it? Thank you for the question. And I think that it's essential to be able to start talking about acknowledgement in the Constitution. We have to be acknowledged as a people in a plurilingual and multicultural framework. And to date, we find that the Peruvian Constitution just includes 2 articles that mention us, but they are not important actually, because they do not approach us as a political group, or they do not acknowledge our social and economic rights, for example. So this is something important, and we can start change by raising awareness around this topic. And the other point has to do with the institutions in the Indigenous framework. If we do not have a solid institutions, we cannot guarantee that we are treated equally, because we don't have a priority. We don't have, we're not important. Some indigenous people think that institutions doesn't have a place in our communities, but I don't think so. I do think that institutions are very important as well. And this can help us to increase our visibility, and that they can strengthen our rights, so that we can also take part in a state, because we are indeed in Peru or in Argentina and Latin America. And usually the state has always thought that we are just there, but we don't have anything to say. So I do believe that our presence in this decision-making spaces is very important. But for that, we need to know how the state works. We need political formation. We need to be able to have institutions at a national level where we can work for our rights. We have to, we need a context to work with. And also we have to raise awareness among the indigenous people, so that we believe that we are capable of taking part in politics. We have a lot of knowledge in what comes to medicine, literature, etc. And for example, also in technology, we can use technology as a resource to strengthen our proposals. Or medicine, as I already mentioned, it is something that we've always have experiences with. We know how important medicine is for us. In my case, for example, I've always used the indigenous medicine, so natural medicine. I've never taken any pill or any painkiller, for example. So it's a very important aspect in our communities. So we have to still work on these issues, and these are the 3 main aspects I wanted to comment on. So we need to be present in the Constitution. We also have to create institutions, and we also have to focus on what we already know as an indigenous people. We have to prove and show everyone that we are equal, that we are capable of taking part in the state politics and policies, and that we should not be subordinated anymore. Thank you, Tania. That's food for thought, and we still have to work, of course, in our visibility. So last question, you would have 2 minutes to answer. You mentioned our knowledge and medicines, and my own people also acknowledges the importance of medicines. So I would like to ask you, could you maybe share some ceremony, ritual, or medicinal plant that the Peruvian peoples are using nowadays to deal with COVID-19? Yes, sure. In the Amazonian region of Peru, our brothers and sisters have established an indigenous committee for health. It's called Matico. Maybe you've heard of it. Anestor Paiva, our brother, was part of the United Nations as well, and together with his brothers, he established this health committee, and they are working with medicinal plants that, for example, helps to deal with sore throat, or when you have an internal infection or external infection as well. In the Andean part, we use a lot of plants such as eucalyptus. Then we also use ginger as well, together with lemon. And this is something we've always used against the flu, for example. And due to this pandemic, this kind of resources and of medicines are helping us a lot. And people are starting actually to heal. In Ayacucho, in my region, we've started to use, for example, steam, and also with medicinal plants, of course, just to be able to clean ourselves spiritually and obviously biologically. These practices are not always well seen by people who actually don't understand us that well. But we just don't have to pay attention what other people say. We are trying to survive.